They sent him in as a joke. He ended the war before sunset. John Carter walked into the briefing room with his hands behind his back. The room smelled of recycled air and cold metal. Officers and diplomats were already seated around a large table, their uniforms spotless, their expressions proud. John felt out of place. He had never wanted recognition or glory. He had only wanted to do his duty quietly, to keep things running. Logistics was his specialty, moving supplies and ensuring soldiers had what they needed. Fighting was not his talent, and politics made him nervous. Yet here he was, chosen to represent humanity in the most important negotiation in history. He could hear snickers and whispered jokes as he walked past the rows of chairs. "They sent the clerk," someone whispered. "He looks like he just delivered the tea." John ignored the comments. He knew the truth. The Galactic Alliance had chosen him not for bravery or rank, but because he would not provoke the aliens with pride or arrogance. The Alliance wanted someone small, someone easy to humiliate. The aliens thought humans were weak, easy to break, and John would arrive as a laughing stock. At the head of the table stood Admiral Rebecca Mason. She was tall, with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority. "John," she said, "this mission is unusual. The aliens are not accustomed to negotiating with humans. They expect to intimidate you. They think it is a joke." John nodded. "I understand," he said softly. "I will do my best." Mason looked at him sharply. "Your best is all we have. Remember, diplomacy is not about showing strength through words. It is about understanding. Observe, listen, and learn. The moment they realize you are unpredictable, they may act differently. Your task is to survive and find a way to end the war without losing lives." John felt a weight in his chest, but he did not speak further. He had no training in alien etiquette or battlefield strategy. All he had was patience and attention to small details. Sometimes, he thought, that was enough. He spent the next hours preparing in a quiet office. Lisa Adams, a young aide, was assigned to help him. She was energetic and nervous, constantly reminding him of the gravity of the mission. "John, they will test you," she said. "I've read their files. They do not respect humans. If you make a mistake, they will make you suffer." John looked at her calmly. "We are not going to make mistakes," he said. "We will watch, listen, and understand. That is all we can do." The journey to the alien homeworld was long. John and Lisa traveled in a small ship under heavy protection. Human fleets moved in silent formations around them, hiding behind asteroids and planetary debris to avoid detection. John spent the time studying alien communications, decoding subtle patterns, and reading reports of alien supply chains and fleets. It was a habit of his to notice the small things. The shape of a transport ship, the way their leaders paused before speaking, the unusual use of colors in their displays. All these details told him more than anyone expected. When they approached the alien capital, John felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Massive towers rose above the surface, glowing with strange light. The city was organized, almost too perfectly, with no sign of disorder. The aliens watched their world as if it were a machine, and every citizen was a small part of the gears. John noticed how tightly they controlled resources, how efficiently energy moved through the city, and how the people obeyed without question. He made mental notes, not of fear but of understanding. They were greeted by the alien liaison, a tall being with translucent skin and eyes that reflected every color of the spectrum. "You are human," it said, voice smooth but sharp. "We expected someone impressive. This is unusual." John bowed politely. "I am here to discuss peace," he said simply. The alien's expression shifted, not with anger but with confusion. It was not used to humans speaking without fear or arrogance. Lisa noticed the alien's hesitation and whispered, "He is doing something unusual." John only smiled faintly and focused on observing. The first day of talks began in a grand hall. The ceiling was high, filled with moving patterns of light. Alien delegates surrounded the human table, their forms strange but graceful. They spoke in measured tones, mocking the humans subtly. "We hear your species is small and weak," one said, a mocking lilt in its voice. "You come to negotiate war with words." How amusing! John did not react, he listened. He noted the words, the cadence, the pauses. He did not try to fight them with anger. Instead, he asked calm questions. "What are your main goals?" he asked. "How do you decide which planets to control?" The aliens blinked, surprised that a human dared to ask direct questions instead of begging or surrendering. Over the next few hours, John noticed patterns in their behavior. They were arrogant, yes, but their arrogance revealed weaknesses. They relied on long supply chains and precise data to maintain their armies. If one link was broken, they struggled. Their confidence was fragile. John did not say this aloud, but he made notes. Lisa leaned closer. "John, what are you planning?" she whispered. He shook his head. "No plan yet, just listening. Everything is in the details." By the evening, the aliens began to lose patience. They tried to intimidate John with stories of human defeats on other worlds. "Your species was crushed many times," they said. "You are not worthy of negotiation." John remained calm. "I am not here to prove worthiness," he said. "I am here to find peace. Can we focus on solutions?" The aliens frowned, unused to such simple logic. Lisa watched in awe as John kept his composure while the room grew tense. In the hallways after the talks, John noticed small details that others missed. A supply officer walking hurriedly, a data terminal blinking in odd patterns, a guard pausing as if unsure. He made mental notes. "Every movement tells a story," he told Lisa quietly. "We just have to read it correctly." Lisa began to understand. The joke the Alliance had expected, the laughable human envoy, was not happening. John was small and quiet, but he observed and understood more than anyone else in the room. That night, John stood at the window of his quarters, looking at the alien city. Lights pulsed in patterns, almost like a heartbeat. He thought about the war, the lives lost, and the arrogance of the alien empire. They believed humans were weak, easy to crush, and that one small man could be ignored. John did not feel fear. He felt responsibility. Sometimes the smallest spark could ignite a change greater than any army. He remembered the words of Admiral Mason. "Your task is to survive and find a way to end the war without losing lives." He understood now that surviving might mean more than hiding. It might mean seeing what others could not see and acting quietly. As he lay down to rest, John reviewed his notes again. Supply lines, fleet movements, cultural patterns, and weaknesses in their communication. He realized that the joke sent to the aliens was not a weakness but a strength. Being underestimated gave him space to watch, to understand, and to plan. The first day had passed, and no battle had been fought, yet John already felt the war shifting in ways no one else noticed. He closed his eyes, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, calm and patient, a quiet man with an unseen power. By the end of part 1, the stage was set. John Carter, sent as a joke, stood quietly in the alien capital, unnoticed and underestimated, yet observing everything. The aliens laughed at humanity, but John already knew they were fragile in ways they did not see. The war had begun in words, and John was listening. He would need patience, attention, and clever thinking to turn the tide. What seemed like a simple envoy mission was quietly becoming the most important act of the war. The second day of talks began early. John Carter rose before dawn, as he always did, and walked quietly through the alien corridors. The halls were long, polished, and filled with strange patterns of light that moved slowly along the walls. Alien guards watched him closely, but he did not hurry or show fear. He noticed the small things, the subtle way one guard shifted weight, the faint glow of energy lines beneath the floor, the whisper of air ducts above him. To most people, these details were unimportant, But John knew that even the smallest observation could reveal more than force or threats. Lisa Adams followed him, carrying data pads filled with reports from human intelligence and analysis. She spoke softly. "John, they laughed yesterday. I do not know how you stayed so calm." John smiled faintly. "Lisa, if we react to their laughter, we lose control. We watch, we listen, and we understand. That is how humans survive when others underestimate us." When the delegates gathered in the main hall, the aliens tried to assert their power again. Their tallest leader, a being named Trivar, loomed over the table and spoke in a sharp, echoing voice. "We expected humans to tremble. You send a clerk, someone insignificant. Tell us, why should we treat you as equals?" His tone was mocking, designed to humiliate. Some human aides shifted nervously, but John leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the table. He did not shout, he did not beg, he simply said, "I am here because the war is costly for everyone. Humans want peace, and I want to understand how we can achieve it." The aliens were silent for a moment. They were not used to humans who did not fear them or fight back with anger. Lisa noticed that Trivar's eyes flickered, a tiny change in color, and she realized the aliens were unsettled. John asked a calm question. "Can you explain what makes a planet important to your empire?" The question was simple, almost childish, yet it made the aliens pause. They had expected a human to plead, argue, or become angry. They did not expect curiosity. As the day progressed, John observed more than he spoke. He watched the way the aliens communicated with each other, through subtle hand movements, the shifting of their bodies, and the changing glow in their eyes. He noticed how they relied heavily on information streams that connected every city, every fleet, and every resource. One small disruption in those streams could create confusion. He noted the pattern carefully, writing it in his pad, understanding that he was building a quiet map of their power. Lisa spoke in whispers whenever she could. "John, do you really think we can survive here without making them angry?" John looked at her calmly. "Anger is only dangerous if we react to it. Observe, learn, and be patient. Humans are not the strongest physically, but we see things others do not. That is our advantage." She nodded, beginning to see the truth in his quiet confidence. Midday came, and the aliens grew restless. They tried to intimidate John with images of past wars and the strength of their fleets. "Your species has failed before," Trivar said. "You do not understand our power." John did not flinch. "Failure is not the same as weakness. Humans survive because we adapt. We look for solutions where others see only obstacles." His voice was calm, almost too calm, and it made the alien delegates uneasy. They were not used to humans who were quiet but confident, who did not beg or threaten but simply spoke truth. During a break, John walked through the observation deck overlooking the alien city. The streets below moved with mechanical precision, and energy flowed through the city like blood through veins. He pointed to a small transport hub far below. "Lisa, notice that. That hub carries most of the energy supplies for the Eastern fleets. If we understand its patterns, we can predict movements and weaknesses." Lisa scribbled notes, her eyes wide. "You already know their supply lines," she whispered. John shook his head. "Not fully, but we can learn by watching. One small observation can reveal more than hundreds of soldiers." While John focused on understanding, small human teams were quietly taking action elsewhere. They did not attack. They did not fire weapons. They simply adjusted trade routes, disrupted minor data flows, and created controlled confusion in the Empire's networks. Kevin Brooks, a human analyst monitoring from orbit, watched quietly as the alien empire started to stumble without noticing why. Fleets delayed, energy flowed unevenly, and minor riots appeared in distant cities. All this happened without a single shot fired. John did not know the details yet, but he could sense the shift. Humans were acting quietly, deliberately, while the aliens remained arrogant and unaware. In the afternoon, John returned to the negotiation hall. He asked another question, simple but sharp. How do you decide when to end a war? The question made the aliens blink. It was not an accusation or a threat. It was curiosity, and it forced them to explain their thinking. Trivar answered reluctantly, revealing that their leaders often delayed decisions, relying on data and reports to guide them, fearing mistakes more than humans did. John nodded slightly. He could see now that their power was organized but also slow and rigid. Rigidity was a weakness humans could exploit without violence. Lisa watched John closely. He is doing nothing, yet everything is changing, she whispered to herself. John smiled faintly. Sometimes doing nothing means observing everything, he said softly. Patience is our weapon. As the sun set in the alien city, John walked back to his quarters. He noticed a small detail in the sky, cloud patterns affecting solar energy collection, something the aliens relied on for their fleet movements. He made a mental note. Small things matter, he murmured. Even tiny errors could cascade into big problems for the alien empire. He realized that while they relied on fear and intimidation, humans could fight differently, using understanding and quiet action. That night, John and Lisa reviewed all the information collected. Maps, supply lines, fleet positions, and behavior patterns were scattered across the table. "We are not fighting with weapons," John said. "We are fighting with knowledge and timing. The aliens do not expect it because they see humans as weak and impatient. But we are patient. We notice details, we adapt, we survive where they fail." Lisa nodded slowly, beginning to see the strategy unfold in her mind. Meanwhile, the alien leaders whispered among themselves, puzzled by John's calmness. "He does not fear us," one said. "He does not beg. He does not threat, he simply listens and asks questions." Another added, "What is he planning? Humans are unpredictable." Their uncertainty grew, not from strength, but from not knowing what the quiet human would do next. John spent a long night thinking about the next day. He did not make threats or plan attacks. He focused on understanding, on watching how every part of the alien empire interacted. He understood now that humans could be dangerous not because of weapons alone, but because of patience, observation, and subtle action. He remembered Admiral Mason's words, "Your task is to survive and find a way to end the war without losing lives." He realized that survival itself could become a tool, a weapon in its own way. Before sleeping, John wrote a short note to Lisa. "Remember, small steps matter. Tomorrow we continue observing. The aliens think they are in control, but control is an illusion. We watch, we wait, and we learn." Lisa read the note and felt a quiet excitement. She understood that this mission was not about heroics, loud speeches, or immediate victories. It was about understanding, patience, and clever thinking, the qualities that humans often overlooked but that could change history. By the end of the second day, John Carter had done nothing outwardly impressive, yet quietly the tides of the war had begun to shift. The aliens still laughed at humanity, still mocked the envoy, still believed their power unchallenged. Yet every observation, every note, every quiet human action was creating cracks in their perception. The empire was strong, but it was rigid. It underestimated humans. John, the man sent as a joke, was quietly turning that underestimation into advantage. He did not know the full plan yet. He did not need weapons or fleets at this moment. All he needed was observation, patience, and the ability to see the weak points that arrogance could not hide. By the time the aliens realized it, the war would no longer be theirs to command. And so John lay down that night, calm and quiet, a simple man in a strange world, observing everything, understanding the patterns, and waiting for the moment when knowledge and patience would become more powerful than fear and violence. The war was still raging across the galaxy. But in this quiet room, in this alien city, The seeds of humanity's unseen strength were quietly taking root. The third day began with a quiet tension in the air. John Carter rose before dawn again, his mind already working on what he had observed over the past 2 days. Lisa Adams followed him closely, carrying the reports from human intelligence and the notes they had made together. The alien capital seemed even more intimidating in the early light, with towers of shining metal and streets moving in precise order below. The city was alive, yet rigid, like a clockwork machine. John noticed everything: the small movements of guards, the faint hum of energy lines beneath the floors, and the subtle signals between alien leaders. Every detail told him something important. When John entered the negotiation hall, the alien delegates were waiting. Trivar and the other leaders looked sharper and more alert than before. They had expected him to be nervous or fearful, but he was calm, observant, and quiet. Some of the aliens whispered to each other. One of their young delegates, Amy, tilted her head as if studying him like a strange puzzle. The aliens could not read him. He gave nothing away. Trivar began the session with mockery again. "Human, do you understand the stakes? Your species has no strength, no fleet comparable to ours. Yet you stand here expecting to negotiate. What makes you think we will listen?" John listened carefully. He did not react angrily or defensively. Instead, he studied Trivar's posture, the slight twitch in his translucent skin, the rhythm of his breathing. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. "I do not ask you to surrender or obey. I ask you to consider the cost of war. Every life lost, every city damaged, every fleet delayed. What does it gain your empire?" The aliens blinked. They were used to humans shouting, pleading, or fighting, but not calmly stating facts. John's words were simple, almost too simple, but they struck a quiet chord. Lisa watched him closely. "He is not arguing, he is not threatening, he is just talking," she whispered to herself. John nodded slightly. Sometimes talking quietly tells more than shouting. Over the next few hours, John asked more questions, each simple but precise. He inquired about their supply routes, the timing of fleet movements, and how their cities received energy and communication signals. The aliens responded reluctantly, believing a human could not possibly understand such complexity. Yet John listened carefully. He noticed patterns. One supply hub fed several military outposts, some fleets relied on delayed data transmissions, and some cities were more vulnerable during energy recalibration. John did not speak about weakness. He simply noted it. Every observation was stored in his mind and in his pad, quietly building a map of their power and fragility. While the talks continued, human teams in orbit and on nearby worlds acted in subtle ways. They did not attack. They adjusted trade routes, interrupted minor data flows, and created small disturbances in the Empire's supply chains. Fleets delayed in moving because their orders relied on precise data, which was now slightly scrambled. Energy flows fluctuated unpredictably. The Empire did not know what was happening. They only sensed that things were not running smoothly. John did not need to fire a weapon. The humans were already making a difference through observation, preparation, and subtle action. In the middle of the day, Trivar grew impatient. He slammed a hand on the table, causing a sharp vibration through the floor. "Human, your questions are clever, but they do not matter. We will win the war. You cannot stop us with words." John did not flinch. He simply leaned slightly forward and asked, "If victory costs every fleet and every city, what is truly gained?" The question was quiet, simple, yet it forced the aliens to pause. They were not used to humans questioning outcomes without fear or threats. Amy, the young alien delegate, tilted her head and whispered to another, "He sees more than we expect." After the session, John walked through the observation deck. Lisa followed, carrying notes. John pointed to a small energy station far below. "Look at that. They rely on it for fleet power in the east. Any disruption, even small, will create delays." Lisa frowned. Are you suggesting sabotage? John shook his head. Not yet, just understanding. We watch and learn. Knowledge itself is power. Patience can be stronger than a fleet. He noticed another pattern while walking. Alien guards rotated in shifts that left small gaps in the hallways. Supply transports followed predictable schedules. Communication relays blinked at exact intervals. Everything had a rhythm. If someone could act quietly, subtly, they could create changes without violence. John wrote down every detail, thinking of how humans could apply quiet pressure to force results. By afternoon, the aliens tried another tactic. They brought up human defeats on distant planets, hoping to humiliate John. Your species has been crushed many times, Trivar said, his tone sharp. How can you claim to negotiate peace? John listened, then replied calmly, defeat does not mean weakness. Humans survive because we adapt. We notice patterns, we learn, and we use patience where others rush. What you see as weakness may be hidden strength. The alien leaders exchanged uneasy glances. The young delegate Amy's eyes widened slightly. She realized humans might be more dangerous than appearances suggested. Later, John and Lisa returned to their quarters. John reviewed the information he had collected over 3 days. He mapped supply hubs, fleet schedules, and energy relays. He noted patterns of rigidity in the alien command structure, moments when decisions took longer, and the reliance on predictable systems. Every observation made the Empire's strength seem smaller and its weaknesses larger. Lisa stared at the notes in awe. John, you have done nothing overtly, yet the war is shifting quietly. John nodded. Knowledge and patience can be more powerful than fleets and weapons. Humans are underestimated because others do not watch carefully. That is our advantage. That night, John wrote a short note to Lisa. Tomorrow, we continue watching. The Empire relies on its order and fear. We rely on observation and timing. One small move can ripple into big change. Remember this. Lisa read it and understood that the mission was more complex than any battle she had imagined. It was not about heroics or dramatic victories. It was about subtle action, quiet pressure, and the ability to see patterns where others saw only strength. As John lay down, he thought about the alien empire. It was strong but rigid. It was confident but fragile in ways it did not notice. Humans, underestimated and laughed at, could act in ways the empire did not predict. John realized that the war could be ended not with fire and blood, but with clever action, careful planning, and patience. Every question he asked, every detail he noticed, and every quiet human move in orbit or on nearby worlds was creating pressure on the Empire without it even realizing. He remembered Admiral Mason's advice. Your task is to survive and find a way to end the war without losing lives. John understood now that survival itself could be a strategy. By observing, noting patterns, and allowing humans to act subtly, the Empire was already beginning to falter. The joke the aliens had expected, a weak, easily intimidated human, was failing spectacularly. John, the quiet envoy, had become something they could not measure or control. The day ended with a calm that masked a growing storm. John closed his eyes, thinking about the next steps. He did not plan violence. He did not raise a fleet or shout threats. He only prepared to act patiently, to continue observing, and to exploit the weaknesses that arrogance could not hide. The Empire's leaders laughed at humanity, still confident, still unaware of the pressure building quietly around them. Outside in the alien city, lights pulsed in patterns as if reflecting the Empire's heartbeat. John noticed small delays in energy collection, minor inconsistencies in transport schedules, and shifts in guard rotations. All were small, but together they were forming cracks in the Empire's control. Lisa watched him, amazed at how one quiet human could perceive what no alien or officer seemed to see. By the end of the third day, John Carter had done nothing that looked impressive to anyone else. No battle had been fought. No weapons had been fired. Yet in the quiet halls of the alien capital, in the observation decks, and across distant supply networks, the balance of power had begun to shift. The aliens remained arrogant, thinking they were unchallenged. Humans were underestimated, mocked, and laughed at. But every observation John made, every subtle human action in orbit, and every note written quietly in his pad was eroding the Empire's control. John lay down that night, calm and patient, a quiet man in a world that underestimated him. He understood that his power lay not in weapons or fleets, but in seeing what others could not, waiting while others rushed, and acting when the moment was right. By the time the aliens realized it, they would have already lost. The war was far from over, but the seeds of humanity's unseen strength were growing, quiet and unstoppable, in ways no one expected. The fourth day began with a quiet tension that John Carter could feel in the air. He rose early, as usual, and walked through the alien city before the halls became crowded. The streets below were already moving in precise order, but John noticed small shifts. Supply transports were slightly delayed, energy relays were flickering at unusual times, and guards moved with hesitation. Nothing large or dramatic, but enough to tell him that humans' quiet actions were having an effect. Lisa Adams followed closely, carrying notes and data from their monitoring teams. She was growing more confident in understanding John's methods, though she still could not explain how one man could make such a difference. When John entered the negotiation hall, the alien leaders were already seated, restless and alert. Trivar's face, usually composed, showed a slight tension. His voice was sharper than usual. "Human, what is your plan? Yesterday you asked many questions. Today, what is your purpose?" John leaned forward slightly, hands folded. "I am here to ensure that the war ends before more lives are lost," he said calmly. "We are not here to fight endlessly. We are here to find solutions." The simplicity of his answer made the alien leaders uneasy. They were used to humans threatening, begging, or shouting, but not speaking quietly and directly about reality. Lisa watched the room, noticing how even small pauses in John's words made the aliens uncomfortable. "He does not argue, he does not beg," she whispered. "He simply states facts and it unsettles them." John nodded slightly. Truth spoken calmly is harder to ignore than threats shouted loudly. The session continued, and John asked more questions about the Empire's fleet movements, communication networks, and city management. Each question was simple, but it forced the aliens to reveal patterns in their operations. John did not react to their attempts at mockery. He noted every twitch, every pause, every subtle change in tone. He could see that the Empire relied on rigid schedules and predictable systems. Any disruption, even small, could create confusion. While John focused on understanding, human teams acted quietly across multiple worlds. They did not fire a single weapon. They delayed shipments, rerouted energy flows, and introduced minor but controlled errors in data streams. The Empire's fleets became slow, cities experienced minor energy shortages, and supply chains wavered. The aliens did not know why their world was faltering. Their arrogance made them blind to human intervention. John knew this, and he smiled faintly, seeing how patience and observation could be more powerful than weapons. Around midday, Trivar tried another tactic. He brought up humans' historical defeats, hoping to provoke anger or fear. "Your species has failed many times before. You cannot claim to influence us." John listened without reaction. Then he spoke calmly. "Failure is not weakness. Humans survive because we observe, adapt, and act when the moment is right. What appears weak may hide strength." The alien leaders exchanged uneasy glances. Even Amy, the young delegate, seemed uncertain. She whispered to a colleague, "Humans, they are different than we thought." After the session, John and Lisa walked through the observation deck. John pointed to a small energy station feeding the Eastern Fleet. "Notice this," he said. "Any disruption here will delay fleets and reduce efficiency. Humans are not attacking, but careful timing can create pressure without violence." Lisa nodded, beginning to understand. "So, we do not fight with weapons but with understanding and timing." John smiled faintly. "Exactly. Knowledge, patience, and subtle action can do more than fleets or lasers." As afternoon came, John noticed more patterns. Minor delays in supply transports, slight hesitations in guards, and irregularities in communication relays. Each small issue was part of a larger ripple caused by human quiet actions. He wrote notes carefully, understanding that these small changes were already weakening the Empire's control. He realized that by sunset, he could show the aliens how fragile their position had become. In the negotiation hall, the aliens grew restless. Trivar slammed his hand on the table, a sharp vibration echoing through the floor. "Human, you have asked questions for days and done nothing. What is your purpose?" John leaned forward slightly. "I am here to show that continued war will only harm your empire. Humans have acted quietly, and the effects are already visible. The more the war continues, the more your world will falter. You do not need to fight us to see this." His calm voice carried authority, though he did not raise it. The aliens looked uneasy. Amy's eyes widened slightly. She whispered, "He sees everything and he does not need to fight." Lisa noticed subtle changes in the aliens' expressions. They were used to confrontation, to fear, or to loud threats. They had never faced someone who simply observed, understood, and acted quietly. John's calmness, patience, and attention to detail were making them doubt their own assumptions. Back in their quarters, John reviewed the notes with Lisa. Maps of supply chains, fleet schedules, and energy networks were spread across the table. He explained, all of these small pressures combine. Humans do not need to attack to create change. The Empire relies on rigid systems, and humans exploit flexibility without force. The cracks are appearing everywhere. Lisa studied the maps in awe. "So we are making the Empire falter without firing a shot," John nodded. "Exactly. Observation, timing, and patience are our weapons." As sunset approached, John returned to the negotiation hall for the final session of the day. The aliens were tense, their confidence shaken by the subtle disruptions in their systems. John spoke calmly, outlining what had already happened due to human quiet actions. "The fleets are delayed, supply lines are faltering, and energy flows are unstable. If war continues, the costs will be higher than you expect. Humans have acted subtly, without fighting, yet the effects are visible. Continuing the war will only weaken your empire further." The alien leaders looked at each other in disbelief. Trivar's face showed confusion and fear. Amy whispered, "They have done all this without fighting." John continued calmly, "Peace is still possible. Your empire can recover and survive. Humans will not destroy you, but if you continue this war, the consequences are unavoidable." There was silence in the hall. The aliens were not used to being confronted by someone who did not shout, plead, or threaten. John's calm statements, combined with the evidence of subtle disruptions, created a pressure they could not ignore. The room was heavy with tension, yet John remained composed, patient, and quiet. Lisa watched, amazed. She realized that the war could be ended without a single large battle, through careful observation, subtle pressure, and patience. As the sun set over the alien city, John's words had reached their mark. The leaders understood that humans had already acted and that continued conflict would be disastrous. Amy, the young delegate, finally spoke softly. "Perhaps we underestimated them." "They are clever." Trivar did not respond immediately. He looked at John with a mixture of anger, fear, and respect. For the first time, the Empire realized that humans were not to be laughed at, not to be mocked, and not to be ignored. John left the hall quietly, walking with Lisa through the corridors. He noticed small adjustments in guard rotations, supply schedules, and communications. The Empire was reacting to subtle pressure without realizing it. He smiled faintly. The war does not need to be loud to end. Quiet actions, understanding, and patience are enough. Lisa nodded. I understand now. Humans are underestimated because they do not appear dangerous. Yet we are. That night, John wrote a note to Lisa. Tomorrow, we finalize. The Empire sees the cracks. Humans have created pressure quietly without attacking. The sun has set and the first change is visible. Tomorrow, peace can be achieved if they choose. Lisa read the note and felt a quiet awe. She realized that history was being made not with weapons, not with fleets, but with calm intelligence, patience, and observation. As John lay down to sleep, he reflected on the day. The Empire had relied on fear, force, and rigid systems. Humans had used patience, subtle action, and careful observation. The cracks in the Empire were visible now, and the leaders could see what they had underestimated. The war could end not with a climactic battle, but quietly, through understanding and subtle pressure. John knew that by tomorrow, the Empire would face the choice between continued conflict and a peaceful resolution that they had never expected. He closed his eyes, calm and patient. He understood that his quiet presence, his observations, and the subtle actions of humans elsewhere had already changed the balance of power. The Empire had been arrogant, confident, and dismissive. Now they were uncertain, hesitant, and aware of human capability. The sun had set on their arrogance, and by morning, the first step toward ending the war quietly, without bloodshed, would be complete. John Carter, the man sent as a joke, had not raised a weapon, had not shouted, and had not begged. Yet by using patience, observation, and subtle action, he had begun to break the Empire's will. The aliens had realized for the first time that humans were dangerous in ways they could not predict, ways they had laughed at until now. And so, the stage was set for the final day. The Empire faced quiet but undeniable pressure. Human intelligence, patience, and observation had created cracks that could no longer be ignored. The choice was theirs: continue the war and risk collapse, or accept the reality humans had quietly created. John had done nothing loud or obvious, yet he had set the scene for an ending that the galaxy would never forget. The fifth day dawned quietly, but John Carter felt a heavy sense of purpose. He rose early and walked through the alien city as he had every morning. The streets were precise, orderly, and yet something was different. Small delays, minor hesitations, and irregular movements he had noticed over the past days were growing. The subtle human actions had created small cracks in the Empire's rigid systems, and these cracks were beginning to widen. Lisa Adams followed closely, carrying notes and reports. She had never seen the city behave like this before. "John, things feel off," she whispered. He nodded calmly. "That is exactly what we want. Nothing must be forced. The cracks show themselves naturally." As John entered the negotiation hall, the alien leaders were already seated. Trivar's expression was tense, his usual arrogance replaced by unease. Amy, the young delegate, whispered to her colleagues, "I think they may have already won and we do not even see it." John did not respond immediately. He simply observed, noting every twitch, every pause, every color shift in their translucent skin. The aliens were uncomfortable, not because he threatened them, but because he had quietly made them realize how vulnerable they were. John began speaking calmly, without anger or accusation. "The war is costing everyone," he said. "Your fleets are delayed, your cities are struggling to maintain energy, and your communication networks have minor failures that create confusion. These problems will grow if the war continues. Humans have acted quietly and the effects are already visible." He paused, letting the words settle. The alien leaders looked at each other, then back at him, realizing the truth in his calm statements. Trivar leaned forward sharply. "Human, are you threatening us?" he asked, voice sharp. John shook his head. I do not threaten, I present facts. The war can continue, but the costs will be high. Humans do not need to attack directly to make a difference. Subtle action is enough. You already feel the effects, Amy whispered again. They have done all this quietly, without fighting, the other delegates murmured nervously. The Empire was beginning to understand that humans were dangerous not because of violence, but because of patience, observation, and subtle strategy. John turned his attention to the records he had compiled over the past days. Supply hubs, fleet schedules, energy relays, and communication nodes were all mapped. Small errors introduced by human teams had multiplied across the Empire's rigid systems. Fleets that were expected to arrive on time were delayed. Energy flows that were assumed steady now fluctuated. Supply lines that seemed unbreakable now wavered. The aliens could see the effects everywhere, and it terrified them. Lisa watched John quietly. He has not fired a single shot, and yet everything is changing, she whispered. John smiled faintly. That is the point. Humans do not need violence to change the world. Observation, patience, and subtle action are enough. By midday, the tension in the negotiation hall was almost unbearable. Alien leaders whispered to each other, trying to understand the extent of the changes. John spoke calmly again. The war can end now. The Empire has a choice. Peace allows recovery, stability, and continued strength. Continued fighting will increase costs, delay progress, and weaken the Empire further. Humans have acted quietly, but the evidence is clear. The choice is yours. Trivar's hands shook slightly as he glanced at Amy and the other delegates. No one spoke. The quiet facts John had presented were undeniable. The subtle disruptions had already weakened the Empire without a single large battle. The aliens were facing reality for the first time. Humans were clever, patient, and underestimated. Their arrogance had blinded them to the smallest signs of change, and now they were trapped by their own assumptions. John continued calmly, "Humans are not here to destroy. We do not seek endless war. We want life, peace, and stability. The war can end before it costs more than necessary. Humans have shown that even without direct combat, we can create pressure that changes outcomes. You feel it now. The cracks are visible. Choose peace or continue and risk collapse." Silence filled the hall. The alien leaders did not know how to respond. Trivar looked around, realizing that their rigid systems, which they had always trusted, had failed in subtle ways. Amy spoke softly. "We underestimated them. Their strength is patience, observation, and timing. They have already made the changes. We cannot fight what we do not see." Trivar's hands tightened. He understood finally that humans were not weak. He had laughed at John Carter, thinking him insignificant, yet this quiet man had already undone much of the Empire's power without firing a weapon. John waited calmly. He did not raise his voice, he did not gesture wildly, he simply presented the facts, the observations, and the evidence. The humans' quiet actions had already shifted the balance. The Empire could feel it. Fleets were delayed, energy flows were unstable, and supply lines faltered. Continued resistance would only worsen these problems. Finally, Trivar spoke, his voice low. Perhaps we have been too arrogant. The humans, they have acted in ways we did not predict," Amy nodded. "We have been too confident. They are clever and patient. We see it now." Trivar looked at John. "Human, you have changed our view of your species." John nodded slightly. "That was not my goal. My goal is peace. The war can end before it costs more than necessary. The choice is yours." A long pause followed. The alien leaders conferred quietly. The subtle pressure of humans' actions, combined with John's calm reasoning, had made their confidence falter. They could no longer rely on arrogance to guide their decisions. They realized that humans were not weak, and that the war was already shifting against them without a single major battle. By late afternoon, a decision was made. the alien leaders signed a treaty of peace. John Carter had not fired a weapon. He had not shouted or pleaded. He had observed, listened, and acted quietly, while human teams subtly disrupted supply lines and communications. The war ended before sunset, not with blood or fire, but with quiet cleverness, patience, and understanding. Lisa watched as the treaty was signed. "He did it," she whispered. "He ended the war quietly." John smiled faintly. Sometimes quiet actions are more powerful than noise. Patience and observation can change outcomes that armies cannot. The humans and aliens left the hall. Outside, the sun was setting, casting golden light over the alien city. John looked at the streets below, still precise but now showing signs of recovery and calm. The subtle pressure applied over days had worked. The Empire's leaders understood human strength in ways they had never imagined. The galaxy had witnessed a war that ended not with violence, but with patience, strategy, and clever observation. Back on the ship returning to Earth, John sat quietly, reviewing the notes and reports from the mission. Lisa sat beside him, amazed at how much one quiet man had accomplished. "John, no one expected this. They sent you as a joke, yet you ended the war without fighting." John nodded. "Being underestimated is a strength. We did not need to fight loudly. We acted with patience, observation, and subtle action. The war ended because the Empire did not predict our methods." The human fleets returned quietly behind him. No battle had been fought on the alien homeworld, yet humanity had shown its power. Not through brute force, but through intelligence, timing, and careful strategy. John's actions proved that humans could be the most dangerous when underestimated, clever when ignored, and patient when rushed. Historians later wrote about John Carter, the man sent as a joke, who ended a galactic war before sunset. They described how observation, patience, and subtle action had changed history. The alien empire would never underestimate humans again. They learned that strength could be quiet, and that intelligence could be more powerful than fleets or weapons. John returned to Earth quietly. He received little recognition at first. Medals were offered, but he refused most of them, saying only that the mission had been successful because humans acted together thoughtfully and without arrogance. Lisa watched him, proud to have witnessed history unfold. "You changed the galaxy quietly," she said. John smiled. "Sometimes, quiet is all it takes. Patience and observation can do more than fire or anger." The sun set over Earth as John walked through the landing area. He felt calm, knowing that the war had ended not with bloodshed, but with understanding, patience, and clever action. Humanity had proven itself in a way the galaxy would never forget. John, sent as a joke, had shown that even the smallest human could change the course of history. And so, the story ended. A war that could have lasted decades ended in a single day, before sunset, not with weapons or violence, but with quiet intelligence. John Carter, the unnoticed envoy, had proven that humans were strongest when underestimated, clever when ignored, and unstoppable when patient. The galaxy would remember this day, and humans would never again be seen as weak.